So hello again and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for our session today on ORCID and ProposalCentral, how to get funding, get credit, and save time. So whether you're familiar with ORCID or if you've never even heard of it, ORCID is an increasingly important factor of your digital identity and impact as a researcher. So today, what we're going to cover is an overview of ORCID. So you'll learn about what ORCID is, an ORCID ID, an ORCID record. We'll talk about how ORCID can benefit you, and then we'll make sure that you know how to get your own ORCID ID if you don't already have one, and we'll cover a few tips for how to save time in populating your ORCID record with information. And then once we're done with that, I'll pass it over to Jamie, and he will talk about how to use your ORCID ID within the ProposalCentral platform. So what is ORCID? ORCID stands for the Open Researcher and Contributor Identifier. And the goal of ORCID is to uniquely identify you as a researcher so that you can get credit and attribution for your work and streamline your digital identity so you can save time on administrative tasks while keeping track of all of your affiliations and contributions in one central place. ORCID is a nonprofit, community-driven organization that serves the entire global research community. So ORCID provides researchers with what we call an ORCID ID. It's a 16-digit number that is unique to you so that you can distinguish yourself from other researchers despite the complexities that come with identifying ourselves by name. And anyone can get their own ORCID ID for free, and it looks something like this. So this ORCID ID that you're seeing on the screen belongs to our volunteer researcher for today, Sofia Maria Hernandez Garcia. And you'll notice that this ORCID ID looks like a link, and that's because it is. So your ORCID ID links to what we call an ORCID record. So if we click on Sofia's ORCID ID link, we're taken to her ORCID record, which is populated with information about her, similar to what you might see on a CV or a resume. So things like employment information, educational background. We can also see on the left side of this screen that Sofia has some other name variations that she's used in the also known as section. And she also has some of her other websites linked. She has her country identified, other identifiers, and then her email address along the side there. And then if we scroll down on this page, we'll see that Sofia also has some other information listed. So she has her membership and services. She also has funding that she has received and research equipment that she's used. And last but not least, she has a list of her publications and works that have come from her research. So that's a basic overview of the ORCID ID and the ORCID record. But let's go into a little bit more depth about why this is important and how it can benefit you. So your ORCID ID distinguishes you from others. It persists over time, even if your name changes or if anything else in your life changes, like if you switch jobs. Your ORCID record can really help to bolster your digital identity, and ultimately your ORCID record can save you time when you have to do things like fill out forms that ask for information about you and your activities. So at the most basic level, your ORCID ID distinguishes you and ensures your research outputs and activities are correctly attributed to you. And this is especially helpful when you're publishing and working with other people. So for example, as you can see in this abstract, there are not only multiple authors, but multiple authors with the same last name and the same first initial. So it's impossible to distinguish who is who and who these researchers are just based on their name alone. But when you use your ORCID ID, it's much easier to distinguish between individuals and get more context around these individuals, which can improve recognition and discoverability for researchers and research outputs. So for example, what you're seeing here, are some recent COVID-19 research data uploads to a platform called Zenodo. And you can see that many of the names of the contributors here have this green ID icon next to their name. And that means that they submitted their ORCID ID when they uploaded their data set. So for those who have that icon visible, we can click on it and be taken to their ORCID record to learn more about these individuals. So for example, if we were to click on the ORCID icon for this first person right here, Juan M. Banda, we're taken to their ORCID record, and we can see that they have their employment information visible, they have their education history, and they also have past works, as well as links to their Twitter, personal website, their Scopus author ID. So this lends some additional context and credibility to this author and distinguishes them from others. There may be other people with the same name, but they would have different information in their ORCID record. So this kind of illustrates how the ORCID record, when it's filled out, can help provide context for other people to know who you are, where you're coming from, and it really helps to distinguish individuals and create a digital presence or digital identity for researchers in their activities. And the ORCID ID is really helpful because, again, if there are other people who share your name, so if you have a common name, if your name has changed, or maybe if you've used different variations of your name in the past, your ORCID ID stays the same. So you can tie all of your affiliations and activities throughout your career to your ORCID record, regardless of your name. And that can be really helpful to distinguish you from other people. So coming back to our volunteer, Sofia Maria Hernandez Garcia, just to illustrate this a little bit more, with all of the different ways that Sofia maybe has in the past or could present her name, when we just look at these name formations, it's really impossible to know if all of these different names are the same person or are they different people. We just have no way of knowing when we're just looking at the name. And if we're looking for an author named Sofia Garcia, there could be multiple people who identify with that name. But again, with ORCID, because Sofia's ORCID ID is unique, we can better distinguish her and her works and activities from other individuals. So ORCID really helps to streamline your online digital identity in the research landscape. And along those lines, just to give you a little bit of additional context, ORCID is currently the most used identifier across the globe for asserting online identity. And as we all know, things are happening online as opposed to in person now more than ever. The chart that you're seeing on the screen illustrates that about 70% of researchers across a variety of disciplines are using an ORCID ID to identify themselves. So the little blue box represents ORCID ID. Along the bottom of the chart, you have a variety of different disciplines. And then along the side, you can see that roughly 70% of researchers across these disciplines are using ORCID ID more than any other identifier. So ORCID is really becoming a standard that's embedded in our research processes. There are over 9 million people that have ORCID IDs across the globe. And these figures are coming from a recent study that was done by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development on the topic of charting the digital transformation of science. And this report, this study that they did, also found that having a persistent, trusted digital identity can have a big impact on the way that researchers are evaluated. And then also that stronger digital identity leads to more research engagement. So things like collaborations and more publications and funded projects. And really the bottom line here, and the thing to remember, is that the more persistent and up-to-date you can keep your ORCID record as a kind of central, trusted place to establish your digital identity and link all of your other profiles to, if people can see that information about you, they're more likely to lend credibility to your work. You're more likely to get funding because you can be verified as somebody who has been active in your field, as opposed to just being a name on a page. So When you think about the very basic aspects of the activities that as a researcher you're involved in, you know, you get a job somewhere, maybe at a university or a research institute or a government agency or some other type of institution. Then you get funding to work on some specific research. You do that research, you publish the results, and then typically you have to report back to your employer and also the organization that provided funding for you. And while this diagram is very simplistic, you get the idea that it can become more complex as you work with more and more organizations. But when you have an ORCID ID and you have your information populated in your ORCID record, ORCID can really help to streamline this process of sharing your information and reporting back to organizations that you're working with. So ORCID is used by funders, publishers, research institutions, and other organizations that are involved in research and scholarly communication across the globe. And ORCID is used to uniquely identify the researchers that the organizations are working with. So in this graphic, you can see we have the researcher at the center with their ORCID ID and their ORCID record. And then the organizations that the researcher is affiliated with can actually connect to their ORCID record to get information about the researcher, but also these organizations can add relevant information to your ORCID record for you, which again helps to save time. So the idea is that you or the organizations that you're affiliated with can populate your information in your ORCID record once, and then you can reuse the information on your ORCID record when you have to provide that information to other organizations. So a really good example of this that many of you may be familiar with is a platform called Science CV. So anyone who is applying for funding from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, or the National Science Foundation, NSF, you have to submit a bio sketch along with your grant application materials, and Science CV is a tool that allows you to create a bio sketch that meets the requirements of NIH and NSF. And if you have all of your data populated in your ORCID record, Science CV is set up to allow you to basically import all of your information from your ORCID record into Science CV, basically by clicking a button. So that can save a lot of time, so you don't have to sit there and manually type all of your information into Science CV. You can keep your information in your ORCID record and then just import it into Science CV because it's an ORCID-enabled system. And so that's kind of where the phrase enter once, reuse often comes into play, is with these systems that are integrated with ORCID that can allow you to basically just transfer your data directly from your ORCID record into the system. And so basically the thing to remember here is that information within your ORCID record is interoperable, which means it can reduce the amount of time you have to spend filling out forms over and over again. If you have your information populated in your ORCID record, you can save time when you have to do things like grant applications and research reporting, as long as the systems that you're using are ORCID enabled. And of course, we're here today to talk about ProposalCentral, which is a system that is also ORCID enabled like Science CV. And so Jamie will talk more about the specifics of that in just a minute. So if you don't already have an ORCID ID, it does take just about 30 seconds to get one, and it's free. So if you don't have an ORCID ID, I encourage you to go ahead and register for your ORCID ID now. It's pretty simple. You just go to orcid.org/register, and all you have to do is put your name and at least one email address and a password. And then you have to basically set a default visibility setting for your data, which you have full control over. And then you set your notification settings, accept the terms of use, and then confirm that you are not a robot. And then from there, you will receive a confirmation email from ORCID that you'll need to click on to confirm your account and start adding your information. Once you have registered for your ORCID ID, or if you already have your ORCID ID, you can log into your ORCID record at orcid.org/ /sign in. You'll see on the screen there are options to sign in with Google, sign in with Facebook. So those are options. The other thing I wanted to make sure that you all know is that if you are affiliated with a university in the US, you should have the ability to also use your institutional credentials to sign into your ORCID record. What you would do is click on this option to access through your institution. And when you do that, you would be taken to a page to just start typing in the name of your organization. And if this functionality is available for you, your organization will appear in the drop-down, and then you just go through the process from there. This is available for most universities in the US. Other institutions, it will just depend. So you might give that a try and see if you can use that, and it basically just helps you so you don't have to remember yet another password for your ORCID record. So registering for your ORCID ID is really just the first step. So I want everyone to remember that in order to really benefit and save time with ORCID, you need to make sure that you have at least some of your information populated in your ORCID record. Before we go into too much more detail, I do want to point out that you do have full control over the data in your ORCID record and your privacy and the visibility of your data. So when you're logged into your ORCID record, you can control the visibility settings for each piece of data in your ORCID record, like you're seeing here. So the options that you can choose from are everyone. This means that anyone publicly on the web will be able to see that information. You can also choose to set your data to private, so only me, and that means nobody will be able to see that information except for you. But do note that if you want to be able to use your ORCID record to transfer data to platforms like ProposalCentral and ScienceCV, you really need to have your information set to either everyone or the trusted parties setting, which really means that only either individuals that you designate or organizations that you connect your ORCID ID with, like for example, ScienceCV and ProposalCentral, will be able to see your information, but it's not going to be publicly available to anyone on the web. So just keep that in mind. And when it comes to adding information to your ORCID record, it really is pretty straightforward when you're logged in. There are several different sections that you can add information to. And just remember that the more information you have in your ORCID record, the more it will serve to distinguish you, and you can save more time when you're interacting with ORCID-enabled systems. So the ORCID record provides space for you to include biographical information about yourself. You can have a biography up at the top. Also, there's the also known as section if you have any other names or name variations that you've used. You can also just go ahead and add your employment and education information, memberships and service, invited positions and distinctions, funding you have received, and works you have produced. And when it comes to the funding and the works in particular, I do have a few tips to share with you on how to quickly add that information to your ORCID record, because those can be a little more complex than just a basic employment entry, for example. So for the works section of the ORCID record, it's down towards the bottom of your record when you're logged in. And if you click on the button to add works, you'll see that there is a drop down that will appear, and it has many different options for ways that you can add works to your ORCID record. And you can use any of these options if you're familiar with them. You can always just choose the add manually option. But I want to make you aware that you can save some time by using this search and link option that we have highlighted here. So if you were to click on the search and link option, you'll see a list appear with various publication databases. And so each of these databases is integrated with ORCID so that if you have publications in any of these sources, like Pubmed, for example, Europe Pubmed Central is on here, you can search for them through the database and have your publications added to your ORCID record without you having to retype any information in manually. For anyone who's publishing in journals, or if you have published in journals, I recommend the cross-ref metadata search and the data site options that are highlighted here with the red arrows. These are really helpful for people that are publishing in journals for works that have what we call DOIs, or digital object identifiers. Most academic journals, for example, assign DOIs to the articles. And so anything that has a DOI will be found in either the cross-ref metadata search or the data site databases. Also, the other good thing about these two databases in particular is that once you connect your ORCID ID, and I'll show you how to do that in just a minute, anytime you go to publish in journals in the future, as long as you submit your ORCID ID when you submit your manuscript, those publications can get automatically added to your ORCID record for you once they're published without you having to do anything. So that helps you save time yet again. So all of these search and link wizards basically work the same way. I'm going to show you an example just using the cross-ref metadata search. So this is just an example, but I do encourage you to log into your ORCID record and play around with this. See if you can find any of your works in these. So if we click on cross-ref metadata search, you'll see a page that looks something like this. And this is basically what you'll see anytime you connect your ORCID ID with a system or an organization or a database. It will ask you to basically authorize that third party to have access to your ORCID record so that they can basically add information to your ORCID record for you, or read any of your information on your ORCID record that you've set to that trusted parties only setting. So when you see this screen, you'll want to go ahead and click the authorize access button. So you're basically, in this case, authorizing Crossref to add works information to your ORCID record for you. Once you click that button, you'll be taken to a page where it takes your name and it will search for works that have those keywords of your name. You may have to limit your search a little bit more, either by the name of the journal or dates, to find your works, especially if you have a very common name. But ultimately, this search allows you to identify your own publications, at which point you can choose to add those entries to your ORCID record. So all you have to do is click Add to ORCID. Once you click that, it'll say it's in your ORCID record. Then you can go back to your ORCID record and verify, and you'll see that the work will just go ahead and appear right there, and it will say that you added it to your ORCID record via Crossref metadata search in this example. So that saved me a lot of time. I just used the Crossref search to add this to my ORCID record rather than me sitting here and typing all of this information in manually. The funding section of the ORCID record also has a similar option. So if you click on the add funding in your funding section, there's a search and link option. In the funding case, there's just one search and link wizard, and it's called Dimensions Wizard. So you'll click on that. And again, you'll start to get familiar with this authorization screen. So it will ask you to authorize Dimensions Wizard to add information to your ORCID record. In this case, they would be adding funding information. So once you click Authorize Access, you can either search for your past grants based on your first and last name, or you can search by keywords from the grant title, for example. Either way, once you do that search, it'll give you a list of matching entries, and you can go through that list and find the ones that belong to you. There's this little checkbox option that you can use to select which entries you want to have added to your ORCID record. Then you scroll down to the bottom of the page, click Next. It will ask you to basically just verify that you do want this information added to your ORCID record, and you just click Submit to ORCID. And again, like we saw with the works and the Crossref wizard, your funding will be added for you if it's available in that Dimensions Wizard database. So I encourage you to go into your ORCID record, give this a try, see if you can leverage any of these tools to help you get started with your with populating your ORCID data. So with those key tips shared, once you have your ORCID ID and you have data in your ORCID record, you can do things like include your ORCID ID in your email signature. When you go to publish, if the publisher asks you for an ORCID ID, make sure you provide that to them. And really just use your ORCID ID anywhere else that makes sense in terms of providing a quick and easy way for people to click on your ORCID ID and just get some context about who you are, where you're coming from. If you have a personal website, you can add your ORCID ID, so that kind of thing. And if you are short on time in terms of adding information to your ORCID record, it's totally fine if you want to just start with maybe your most recent employment and your most recent publications or something like that. And then, you know, think of it maybe kind of like a CV. When you go to update your CV periodically, just go into your ORCID record and add more information as you can, as you have time. Because again, the more information that you have on your ORCID record, the more it will serve to benefit you. So that's my overview of ORCID and how you can get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that Jamie can share and talk to you a little bit more about the details around ORCID and Proposal Central.
Thank you, Sheila. Great overview. And thank you everybody for attending. I think most of you are already on Proposal Central. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you take the information that Sheila provided you about adding content to your ORCID record. How do you use that in Proposal Central? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the funders in Proposal Central, why they request ORCID, and I'm going to show you how we've integrated ORCID into the process of applying and managing awards in Proposal Central that leverages what you've put into your ORCID record. And I like to tell people I'm an ORCID evangelist. I believe that this is a great source of being able to maintain dynamic information about you that you can use in a lot of different places. So in Proposal Central, you know, we have 210 funders. When you're on this single platform, you only have to connect your ORCID record once. And then you're able to use that data in interacting with any of those funders on Proposal Central. In 2020, 52 of the funders that are on ORCID that are on Proposal Central require you as an applicant to have an ORCID ID. And so this year we have right around 59% of our applicants in 2020 had an ORCID ID, and it's about 39,000 total users in Proposal Central that have this. We're seeing that number go up by leaps and bounds every year. So almost all of our funders, I think, coming into next year will be requiring ORCID of their applicants because it's easy and also makes the process simple for them. And I'm going to show you a little bit about how you use that information and how they're using that information to demonstrate impact to the people like donors that are giving them money, and they want to show the great things that you've done as researchers. How do they use ORCID to do that? And so I'll also point out that the National Institutes of Health has started requiring, last fall, they started requiring in career development awards, the ORCID ID. They're going to be expanding that. So Sheila showed you how they've also got that integrated with Science CV. And so there's more. And so we saw with NIH jumping on board with ORCID as a requirement during the application process, even more of our funders on the Proposal Central platform joined in. So why did they do that? most important thing to them as they started looking at ORCID was this difference in name, all these people that Sheila showed you, because the funding community uses Pubmed, Crossref, other data sources like clinicaltrials.gov to look at what you've been doing as a researcher and the kinds of impacts and connections that you've got there. And so they need to be able to uniquely distinguish you. And that wasn't really easy when you just had the name. So names can be very similar. It's not clear who's who. ORCID solves that problem, and it's free for you, right? So very simple thing to do, identifies you across all these data sources that funders use to communicate impact of the grants and their grantees that they've supported. So this is a representation of a dashboard that we show funders about you if you're an awardee or an applicant in Proposal Central. And I use this to illustrate if you don't put any content in your ORCID record, this graph looks really barren. But if you put the kinds of publications you've done and the other grants you've gotten, what you can see down here is that the funder can see when the first grant was that they gave to you. Maybe you got some follow-on grants. Those are the light blue bars from that same funding organization. The green line on here represents the publications that you made after that funding and throughout your career. And then the dark blue bars are the other funding from other agencies that you would have entered. So if you filled this out in your ORCID record, all of this is pulled into Proposal Central to give this picture to the funder that they can use to communicate the type of impact that you've had as a researcher that they gave funding to. And so for them, that's a really important step. And for you, it would be important to be able to let these funders know the extent of the impact that you've had. And so by putting that content in there, it gives them access to that. And because ORCID is a persistent source of that information, right? As Sheila showed you, if you load the data from Crossref, Crossref has an automated tool that will update that, your record as you publish. And so a funder coming in here could see that you continue to publish in the field and what you were publishing and things like that, that require very little maintenance effort on your behalf to do. So in order to help the funder have this information about the impact that you're having in your research area, we integrated ORCID into the whole Proposal Central workflow, one, to make it easy for you to do this and to make that information then available to the funder. And so you can connect your ORCID record to Proposal Central when you start, or if you already have a profile, you can pull the data into your profile. And then in applications and progress reports, you can use the content like publications and degree information and other funding that you've gotten in those applications where the funder asks for that kind of information in that process. And then what we have done is allow the funders to push the award that they gave you into your ORCID record. And so when you've done the connection and we've gone all the way through this process, the funders can then update your ORCID record for you so you don't have to maintain that information on there. And I'm going to show you a few of those in the next couple of screens. So if you're familiar with Proposal Central, you've been on there recently, you have a professional profile that you fill out. The simple step here is create or connect your ORCID ID. So that lets you connect to ORCID, and then it lets you pull the content that you have put in ORCID, like your publications and the funding that you've received, or degree information or employment, into your Proposal Central record. So it eliminates having to retype that information into Proposal Central. Once you've established this connection, we actually will automatically pull updates in for you about publications, and other funding, and we're gradually adding more of this, the data that we can automatically pull into Proposal Central for you. So here's an example, right? Once you're connected and you've set the trust level for the content in your ORCID record, anything that you have set at either everyone can see, that is the information in your ORCID record is public, or any ones where you've set it to trusted party, we can pull that data for you into your Proposal Central profile. An example here, as we're showing this, would be the publications you've done. So as you publish throughout your career, we're able to pull this information to keep your profile and Proposal Central current for you. So the profile is one part where we do that integration. We then use that same data. So almost all of our funders, one of the really important connections they'd like to get from you, and you'll see this in progress report. It used to be these came in PDF files or Word documents. Now we're collecting publication data that resulted from the grant that you received in data web forms. So you could retype that data directly into Proposal Central, but if you've used ORCID to pull that content, let's say out of Crossref or Pubmed Central or any of those places, then all you're doing is picking them off the list. Makes it really simple to report that data to the funder. For them, that is an essential component. So they say, look, we have funded these projects and these researchers, and the publications are one of the key measures that they have to link what came out of that grant and how that then gets connected to developments that are emerging in that area. So new discoveries and drugs that are released and new therapies that have come out, they're able to make this connection between the grants, the impact that you've had, and the influence on those outcomes and outputs. So very essential measure for them. And we make it easy by allowing you to pick this data from what has been in your ORCID record. So one other thing that you might consider a significant benefit would be not having to remember as many passwords. So in Central, if you want to do it, you can log in with your ORCID credentials. So just remember your ORCID credentials, use that to log into Proposal Central. We know many other places, including research institutions and places like that, they're also using this as a single sign-on. So instead of using Facebook or Google, you might think of ORCID as a set of credentials that you could use in lots of places to do that once you've connected that in their systems like Proposal Central. So the next step here is to tell you a little bit about how you do this authorization task. So as I mentioned, there are different levels of trust that occur in here, and you are completely in control of who has access to the data in your ORCID record. So in Proposal Central, we call that an authorization, right? So when you link your profile to Proposal Central, you authorize Proposal Central. Many of the funding organizations, the American Heart Association, the Children's Tumor Foundation, the Simons Foundation, a lot of these organizations who are using Proposal Central as a platform are also members of ORCID, and they may run journals or they may have other systems. And so what you can do when you're in Proposal Central is also authorize that funder directly to access your trusted information and also to update your ORCID record with the funding. And so you may get contacted by the funder through Proposal Central in what we call a deliverable. So like you would submit progress reports, that deliverable might show up and ask you just to authorize the funder or Proposal Central as a platform. And you'll see it look like this, where you've got the, in the task, the authorization button, and then the familiar authorization in ORCID that Sheila was showing you, and then you just submit that and everything's done. And this gives that funder direct access to provide that update to your record. So what the funder sees, this is the screen that they see. You see the little ORCID green ID tag. That means they know that you've linked your ORCID record. And down at the bottom, they have the option then to send this funding record to your ORCID record. And so that's enabled once you give the authorization. So the authorization either be at the level of Proposal Central, that is, you've authorized us as the platform to do this for any of the funders that you have a grant from, or it could be that you authorize a specific funder like the American Heart Association or the Children's Tumor Foundation, and we'll do the update, but it will show up in your record as coming directly from them. So if they update your ORCID record with an award, you'll get this email. This kind of depends on how you've set the communication settings in your ORCID record. But if you set it like I had on here, you would get this email that says the Children's Tumor Foundation added this project, this award to your ORCID record. And then if you logged into your ORCID record, you would see, as an example up here in the top left, you see that for Raymond Kim, his funding shows that the source of that data came from the funder themselves. For John, who is here, and the St. Baldrick's Foundation, who is not a member of ORCID, it shows that the source is Proposal Central. And so that's the difference between the two of them. The Children's Tumor Foundation is a member of ORCID, St. Baldrick's is not, but both of them in the record show who the funder is that you got the award for. It's just that the source is different, either the platform or the funder themselves. So the big advantage here, and I bring this up because we want this to be easy. And so ORCID, the way that they've set that up is any place you use those ORCID credentials and allow the system to do that update, they'll update your ORCID record for you. So think cross data site for publications, think Proposal Central and Dimensions for funding data, and your research institution, right? Affiliation information and stuff like that. So if you use that, all of us that are integrating ORCID into the systems and processors are trying to help you by making this as easy as possible to keep that ORCID record up to date. What could you do? So we're just listing 4 easy steps. The first one is get your ORCID ID. It's free. It takes 30 seconds. You probably may already have this. So the second thing to think about is what's your default privacy setting. And my suggestion is that you make this available to everyone. In the growing emphasis on open science, making this information available publicly, really strong commitment on your part to that openness. If you're not comfortable with that, then maybe some sections of the data or some individual pieces, maybe just to the trusted systems that you've linked to, like Proposal Central. Then the third step here would be to put some content in there. You don't have to do everything. This doesn't have to be the end all be all, every piece of data is in there, but using the wizards like Crossref and Dimensions will allow you to really quickly add publication data and funding data, which is essential to, at least in Proposal Central, whoever you have an award with, that to them is extremely valuable information that they can use to help get more money to fund the research, like the research that you're doing. And then, make sure your ORCID record is linked to your Proposal Central profile. It takes one click to do that. We'll pull all the publication and funding data directly into your profile. That piece is really, really simple and straightforward. And not sure how to do this. Sheila and I have put together this list of resources that are available to you for help. And I put at the bottom of this our Proposal Central help desk. So as an awardee in Proposal Central, you can call this anytime and ask us to help you in doing this. And so our team, because we've made a big commitment into ORCID, is really well versed on how ORCID works and how you pull this, how you use this in Proposal Central. So feel free, if you need to do that, to call on us. Sheila has done an amazing job of putting together a lot of resources to guide you through all the steps that are in here. And then, she's got community forums and things like that. It's got a lot of additional help information in there. So take advantage of that. This helps you. It also helps the funders that are funding the research that you're working in. And so we appreciate you taking the time today to listen to this, to learn how to use the ORCID record. We hope you'll put content into your ORCID record. And I think, Sheila, at this point, we stop and see if anybody has questions.
Yes, thank you, Jamie. And just so everyone knows, I will be sending out an email with the link to the recording, but also all of those resources and links that Jamie just showed will be sent out to everyone in an email. So you'll have those. So I didn't see anybody typing into the chat. Does anybody have questions? Okay, I see a question coming in. Does ORCID interface with my NCBI? Yeah, that's a common question that we get. So basically, yes, through the Science CV platform. So when you go, if you're applying for NIH or NSF funding and you need to create your biosketch, you can use Science CV to do that. And you can choose to connect your ORCID ID with Science CV so that it will pull information from your ORCID record into Science CV through that connection. And when you get that authorization screen, when you go to connect your ORCID record to Science CV, you'll be authorizing NCBI as the trusted organization. That's really you can connect your ORCID ID to ERA Commons, but it doesn't do any transfer of data yet. The Science CV platform is really the only one so far that for NCBI that allows for importing your data from ORCID into Science CV. And I know that NIH is starting to use ORCID more and more. They are requiring ORCID IDs for certain types of grants, and they are working on doing more integrations. But as of right now, the Science CV is the main place where you can link your ORCID ID and use that data import. Yeah. Any other questions? Is there an option to link to Publons? Yes, Publons does have an ORCID integration, and when you do peer review activity, Publons will write that to your ORCID record for you if you've authorized them. I can't tell you the details on how to link to Publons, but that is something that exists. So you might go and just investigate on the Publons side. But Publons will write any peer review activity that you've done that can appear on your ORCID record too, and they will write that to your ORCID record for you. So yes, Publons is integrated with ORCID. I'm seeing a couple other questions. One, can you talk again about how ORCID collects previous publications into the records? Yes, so basically, ORCID has a number of databases, and maybe I can share my screen again to illustrate this to kind of help. I can go actually to my own ORCID record. So basically, ORCID has a number of publication databases that are connected with ORCID. So those past publications can be added to your ORCID record as long as you have publications in the databases that are available. So we'll give this a minute to load. So basically it's like, it's not going to capture everything, but depending on, you know, what research field you're in, and also especially if you've published in journals where your articles have digital object identifiers or DOIs, there's a strong chance that you'll be able to find your works in the databases that are already connected with ORCID. So in the work section of the ORCID record, if you go to add works and click on search and link, you'll see all of the databases that are currently connected are listed here. So you might be familiar with Pubmed, you might have things in Scopus. You can kind of just poke around and see some of these are specific to certain countries. So this HAL is part of the research infrastructure in France, so you might not have something in there. But the two that I encourage you to look at starting off are the Crossref metadata search and the data site, because any journals that have a DOI, digital object identifier, should be appearing in one of these two sources. So, you know, when you go to click on one of those sources, it will automatically, well, first you have to authorize access like we saw. So you'll see this authorization screen when you first go to do this. But then it will basically take your name and it will go ahead and search their database for your name. And you might have to, you know, narrow the search results to find your articles. But if you know that you've published in articles, so you have these options to narrow by year. So if you know you published something in 2009 or what have you, it will be available in the database. You just have to do some narrowing of your search. The publisher is also an option, funder name, for example. So then you can just select add to ORCID when you find your item, and it will add it to ORCID. And so that's how it kind of handles a backlog of publications. But of course, again, your publications would need to be in one of these databases in order to add them that way. If you have works, I mean, works can be other things besides publications. It can be presentations that you've given at a conference. It can be a data set. You know, it can be any kind of output related to your research. So if you can't find your works in any of these databases that are linked up, you can always choose this add manually option. And I'll show you what that looks like. And basically you just fill out a form with information about whatever work it is. You'll have to pick a category. So if it's a publication, a conference, intellectual property, or other. If you choose the other option, you'll notice that there are a lot of things listed here. So artistic performance, for example, or lecture, speech, a physical object, you know, standards, software. You can also select other if it's something that's not on the list. So it really is kind of this catch-all for any kind of output that you have created. And then you go from there, so on, just filling out the form, and then you can add it to the list if it's not already available in those databases. Let's see. Oh, I think I have to like stop sharing my screen so I can see the chat. Okay, here we go. All right, so I have a note saying, my boss has been a noted research scientist for over 30 years. When we try to use the wizard options, what can you tell us about going back for many years? So that's a good question. Will the info generally be fairly recent, given the fact that there have been so many changes in journals and relevant databases? How will this work for long histories of articles and funding? That's a really good point. Some of the very early works you might not be able to find in the databases. I'm not exactly sure when publishers started using DOIs, but that is like kind of a relatively new technology. So definitely something that was published 30 years ago. You may or may not be able to find that. I know some publishers have gone and made their previous content available online and have gone and retroactively assigned DOIs to those works. But it's not guaranteed. So you might just give it a try and see like how far back you can go, but those wizard options may not capture works that came out several years ago. It will skew more towards the more recent publications. So you may be able to find some publications in there that you can go ahead and add, but if you want it to be comprehensive and you want to have everything there, you might have to do a little bit of work to enter that information manually if it's not available in the search and link wizard. So that's a really great question. I'm seeing another question. Can we pull can we pull into ORCID our list from NCBI collections? As of right now, that is not available. So I know that NCBI has like the My Bibliography, where a lot of people are already storing lists of citations. And so right now, those cannot be transferred to ORCID. We're hoping that soon that option will become available. But as of right now, that's not available, unfortunately. But we're working in that direction to get more and more platforms integrated with ORCID so that you can transfer data to your ORCID record or from your ORCID record into the other platform as time goes on. Let's see, any other questions? These are really great questions. Thank you all. So like I said, I will be sending out an email with the link to the recording, all of the resources, contact information if you do need help. So y'all will all have my email address. So if you do think of additional questions, of course, if it's specifically related to Proposal Central, you'll want to contact the Proposal Central help desk. But if it's about kind of ORCID in general or needing help getting information populated in your ORCID record, you can contact me as well, and I can help with any additional questions that might come up. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. So I do hope this has been helpful. I hope it has made you a little bit excited to start using your ORCID record a little bit more. And just stay tuned for our email with the resources. But thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. And with that, I think we can go ahead and conclude because we are at the hour.